Oh yeah! Alright guys, so we are officially getting back to work on the H22, so I'm stoked. Here's where we're at right now. So I decided to slap the new valve cover on here. It looks so good. It contrasts very well with the black, so I am stoked about that. Got my Downstar hardware on here and it matches beautifully. Pretty happy with how these welds turned out too. I put quite a bit of work into smoothing these out, and it definitely paid off because they just have a really nice smooth transition now. So that came out really nice. I'm currently working on a decal that I'm going to put on the DOHC VTEC. So I'm hoping to print that out in black. I'm just having a hard time finding the proper dimensions and making it match this logo exactly. So it's taken a bit of trial and error to get it perfect, but I think once it's done, it's gonna look really good. Today's project is to get the oil feed and oil return figured out. So I have all my stuff laid out here that I got from Treadstone, and then I also have my AEM oil pressure gauge, which comes with the oil pressure sensor as well. So I'm gonna try and incorporate that. So I got some AN line here and some fittings in my Treadstone kit. So these will be for the oil return. I also have this bung here, which is supposed to thread into the oil pan. So there's already a bung welded in here on the oil pan. So I'm hoping the threading is the same. It should thread in there, and then that's where the oil will drain back from the turbo. So I guess that'll be step one. I'm going to take that plug out of there and try fitting this in there. We'll see how that works. Now these do have a tendency to leak, so I did put some thread seal on here that is compatible with oil and gasoline. So hopefully that seals. We'll thread this in here. So now that this part is figured out, now we have to find a way to get the oil from up here down there. I believe this 45 here is going to go on the turbo, and then the straight fitting is going to come off the oil pan. So my original idea was that I was going to have the oil drain come off the turbo to the 45 down this way, and then end up in here, so it would go over top of the turbo manifold. I don't think that's going to work though, because this 45 is shooting directly towards the middle of the manifold here, and I think the line is going to have to bend way too sharp to come through here, bend again, and then bend to this. So I don't think that's the best way to do it. I think the best way that I'm going to be able to do it is to have the oil line come off this way instead, and it'll kind of wrap around the manifold and to the oil pan. So now if I have the 45 pointing the other way, the line's going to come off like this, kind of go under the manifold, and then loop to the oil pan this way, and then that way there's no chance that the oil has to travel uphill. It's all going down and straight into the oil pan. So I think that's the best way to go. The only real problem I can think of with that setup, having the oil return right here, is that the exhaust comes off of here as well, and factory exhaust would run straight down here. So for the time being, I don't know what I'm gonna do for an exhaust. When I get the car running, I think I'm just gonna have a flange and a pipe come off of here and go straight up. I'm not gonna run a hood. I just wanna get the car running, and then once I can bring it to an exhaust shop, I think I'm gonna have them fabricate me something, but we won't really be able to figure any of that out until the engine is in the car and working, because then we can kind of figure out how we can route that stuff. So I'm not gonna worry about exhaust at the moment. I just wanna get this oil from here down there. So now that I got the basic idea figured out, I guess it's time to start making some AN lines. Now, I'm not very good at this. We had made up some lines for my catch can and they turned out okay, but I think if I was to use those lines in a sealed system like this, they would probably leak. So I'm gonna give this a try. Hopefully I don't make too many mistakes this time. And if I do have some extra line from that catch can kit because it's running the same kind of hose as this. So I think what I'm going to do is wrap masking tape around this and then cut this frayed end off with a grinder, which will leave a nice clean edge on it that we can try and stick in the end of here, and then we tighten it up. So it sounds pretty simple, but we had a pretty hard time with it last time, so hopefully it goes a bit smoother.
Get to making with jive, boy, shine. When it hits you, yes, indeed, yes, yes, you shine. When it hits you, yes, indeed, yes, yes. When it hits you, yes, 1, 2, 3, do it.
All right, well that fitting worked out beautifully. I don't know why we had so much trouble with the catch can one, but this one was a breeze. So it was probably because we used cheap eBay AN fittings for that one. This is good quality treadstone stuff, so this was actually very simple to do. So now that I got the line on here, we can kind of get an idea of what kind of length we're gonna need. So I'm thinking I'm going to wrap the line around here this way, and then it'll go around the front of the manifold and go straight to the oil pan. So I'm gonna find out, I'm maybe gonna put my fitting on here, and then I can get my length, and then we'll see where to make the cut on this one. I don't wanna make it too short, I'd rather be a little too long. Even if it is a bit too long, we still have plenty of clearance. Actually, a little bit longer might not be a bad thing, because it'll kind of keep the line a bit farther away from the manifold, but I also don't want it to get in the way of the wastegate, so I gotta kind of be careful in this area. Luckily this hose is flexible, so if the wastegate is kind of contacting it, it'll just kind of push it out of the way. So yeah, I'm just going to put my fitting on here, we'll get our length, cut this off, and make the end of this one, and then that one's done.
A few moments later.
Alright guys, that worked beautifully. We now have an oil drain. Now I want to try and figure out the oil feed. So I am missing a few parts, so I'm not going to be able to finish it today, but I do need the flange for the top of the turbo here, so I won't be able to hook that up, but at least I can get most of this figured out, I think. So the kit came with some fittings. So I got a 90 elbow, a straight. This is an oil feed reducer, so I'm not going to be dumping oil in there. And then I also got a T. So what I'm going to be using for the oil supply is where the oil pressure switch is on the back of the block here. So basically this sensor is going to come out. So that will allow us to thread our T in here. So now that the T is installed, we'll be able to reinstall the oil pressure switch, and then we would have the oil feed come off the back side. So this should work okay if I wasn't running an oil pressure gauge as well. So now this oil pressure sensor has to plug in somewhere. So now I'm not going to be able to use this T. I'm going to need one with another side on it so that I can have the pressure switch, the sensor for the gauge, and then the feed line coming off of it. So that T isn't going to work either. Alright guys, so I've been messing around with this for quite a while already, trying to figure out a way to make this oil line work. None of the fittings I have seem to be working. So my idea was to get a 4-way T that's going to have another end come off of it so I can plug everything in, but I think it's just going to be way too congested in this area. I did go ahead and order a sandwich plate that has 3 ports on it, so I'll be able to keep the oil pressure switch here, and then I will just plug in the oil feed and then the oil pressure gauge sensor into the sandwich plate. So that'll solve that problem. Having a sandwich plate on here will also bring the oil filter out a little farther, which means it won't drip oil all over my sensor here. It'll instead drip oil all over my shaft, so it'll be well lubricated.
4 to 6 weeks later.
Alright, so me and Tim are going to be tag teaming some installs today. So Tim's on the Googles right now, trying to figure out
some stuff.
how on earth the fuel pressure gauge is going to fit on here when I have a regulator right here. So while he works on that, I'm going to be figuring out installing my clutch reservoir delete hose. So this essentially will attach to the brake reservoir and attach itself down here to the clutch master. So should be a pretty simple install. I think we just drill a hole in the side of this, tighten that up, and tighten that clamp on there and call it a day. So according to the Chase Bay's site, this is where I'm going to drill the hole. So that's going to be right about here. So I guess I'm just going to drill a hole and hope for the best.
You sure about this, Matt?
Nope. So I very haphazardly marked where I'm going to drill my hole with some green nail polish. I've plugged the inside hole with paper towel so I don't get shavings in there. And we're just going to hope for the best. This is smaller than I need, but I'm at least going to make a pilot hole right about there. I'm trying to get it centered with the opening here so that when I'm tightening the nut inside I can actually access it with a wrench. So that's right about, yeah, that's pretty exact. Okay, it's done. There's no going back.
That was easy.
That's it.
Is it time for the Christmas tree?
Really hope that nut's gonna fit on there. Yeah, I got my Christmas tree bit now, since all my other bits are too long, but this should work.
Gently.
I want to go up to about a 1/2 inch, I think, but I'm gonna stop there.
How's the situation here?
Well, I think I put my hole in the right spot, and I made it big enough. It appears to be threading now. So that's where we're at. Now I'm gonna grab a couple wrenches, and let's cross our fingers that we can fit this in there. Okay, so the wrench doesn't fit. Maybe this side does. Okay, this side. That's the key. Okay, that'll work. So this is kind of why I wanted to center the hole with the opening here so I could fit a wrench in there. So I can get this tight gently because I don't want to scratch nothing. Oh shoot. Something about like that.
Looks pretty good, Matt.
Now I guess we just run our hose and done deal.
So while Matt's over there working on that brake line, I've been over here trying to get this fuel pressure gauge installed, and that's a little more work than you would expect because the fuel pressure regulator, which you can see is now upside down, when it's right side up, it does not leave enough space for the gauge to be mounted in here because these holes are just so close together. They could have spaced them like another couple mil and that would have solved all their problems. But I have now flipped the fuel pressure regulator. I believe this should work. I don't see a problem with it being upside down, other than the logo being upside down. But it is a pressurized system, so I expect it should be okay. But if you guys know if this is not going to work, please let us know in the comments before we actually get this thing in the car and run it. So, Matt, what do you got for me next? I'm sitting over here, just a pair of hands ready to work.
You want to put in the fuel lines?
Yeah?
Or I guess it doesn't make sense to do the clutch lines because I'm working on the clutch.
Yep. I'll start on the fuel lines.
So
I'll start on that side.
Pull up the Chase Bay's website. Chase Bay's has got a pretty good diagram of how to put the fuel lines in. So start there and see where we get.
Okay, boss.
I think that'll just about do her. Oh yeah, she's tight, boys. Had to shorten this line a bit because it was quite a ways too long, and I actually could have gone a bit shorter yet, but I think this will work just fine. Looks great. Very happy with that. Alright guys, progress has been pretty slow. A lot of stuff is not lining up or working properly. So for one, my clutch line that I ordered, this banjo bolt is way too small for the clutch master. So this is a 5/8 and this is smaller. So unfortunately the Chase Base site does not have measurements on what size fittings they use, so I just had to assume it was the right one, but it is not, so I will not be able to use this line. I also ordered the wrong fuel line kit, so this one is meant for an external fuel pressure regulator, whereas mine is mounted on the fuel rail. So essentially this line is supposed to go to a fuel pressure regulator and then from the regulator go to the fuel rail, and so these lines are too short. So I think what I'm going to end up doing is probably order some of this AN line, and we'll just reuse some of these fittings and we'll just make our own lines. We also, because we have the high flow filter, it also doesn't work on this kit, so we're gonna have to mock up some stuff and probably do our own fabricating to make it work. So I don't think we'll be able to figure much of this out until the engine is in the bay. Same with the clutch line. I'm wondering if I might still be able to use this, but I'd have to bring it to a shop to get them to crimp on a different end with the right size. But by doing that, I'm going to shorten the line. I don't know if it's going to be too short if I do that. So again, I won't know that until I try to mock it up in the engine bay. So I think we are getting pretty close actually to having to put this thing in the bay. We may have to put it in the engine bay, do some mock-up, pull it out again, finish all the mock-up, and then put it in a final time. So I'm thinking, we've kind of been doing some brainstorming here, but that's starting to seem like that might be the best course of action. That way we're going to know exactly what I still need to order, if I need to return those lines, or if we can just make something work. Also, we got the coolant overflow tank, which again, I don't believe we'll be able to install until the engine is in and all the piping is routed, because I don't know for sure what's all going to be in the way. So that's something else we're going to have to hold off on. So in the meantime, we do have the sandwich plate. So I think we can probably install this tonight. Maybe get the oil supply routed to the turbo. I just still don't have this flange, so we won't be able to finish it. But we'll most likely be able to get this on.
Toss that sucker on. It's got an O-ring there. We have 4 sensor ports. We will just plug 3 of them and then just install the one oil pressure gauge coming out of the one.
Oh, we also want the oil feed for the turbo.
Right,
so also going in there.
That's true, it's a good point.
And while Tim's busy over there reading the instructions, I am going to remove the old oil filter, which isn't really old because it's never been used. But yeah, I know it's a Fram, but it's just for break-in purposes, boys. We're going OEM Honda later on, don't worry. Alright, so at this point I have cleaned the sandwich plate with a small brush and some mild wax and grease remover. So I believe we are ready to install this. So I think we're going to get some fresh oil on the gasket here. Castrol Edge 10W30.
Hey, it's a good way to ruin some bearings. Ask me how I know.
I don't know, I've been using it on my race car.
Yeah, I still use it. I like Castrol.
Having a Honda also helps with
true.
the whole reliability thing.
But the thing is,
Alright, so we've tried a couple different mock-ups. We haven't mounted it permanently yet, but just trying to figure out which way we want the oil feed to run. So the first way we had it set up was with these 2 ports that are on the top. They were actually facing this way, so that we had the oil pressure sensor and the oil feed coming this way. So then the oil feed ran up and kind of on top of the valve cover here and around, and then we would have a 90 coming off of this, shooting back Doing that worked, but we ended up with a lot of extra slack in the line that we would have to eat up somewhere. So now we've tried mounting the sandwich plate with the ports facing up. We have a 90-degree coming off of it. Then the feed shoots back like this, kind of wraps around, and this kind of eats up a lot of the length around here. This won't be used, so I'll be able to thread a bolt in here with a clamp, which will hold it tightly up against there. And then could possibly also run clamps, maybe 1 or 2 up here, just to hold the line nice and tight. And then it's basically just gonna wrap around here, go to a 90, and that is basically the perfect length. So I think that's the route we're gonna go. It actually looks pretty tidy. You're not gonna have long lengths of line in your face. It's gonna be nice and tucked away. So I'm kind of liking routing it this way.
So what are we doing here? We're taking a clamp.
And I'm trying to oversize the hole a bit so I can mount it where I want to mount it. So basically this bolt's got to fit in that hole, which it does now.
Now that that fits, Matt, show us what you're going to do with it. Nuh-uh.
Okay, this is going to go here. That's basically going to hold the oil supply in place and out of the way of the thermostat, so it shouldn't be heat soaking.
Beauty.
And yeah, we'll throw a few more clamps on there and we should be good to go. Yeah. Show the folks at home what you're working on, Tim.
I've been trying to see how many PSI I can produce out of this turbo.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Even with a boost leak, she still spins.
Yeah, it's not bad. I'll work. About my engine, I'm doing
Alright guys, update time. So we're finally making some progress. We got the line ran. So basically we're gonna have a 90 come off the turbo. We don't know exactly how much length we're gonna need here, but I think we're fairly close. We do have some room for adjustability up here if needed, but we got 1 P-clamp here and here, holding it nice and tight so it shouldn't move on us, and it's not contacting anything, so I think we're safe there. We're not gonna risk rubbing through. Also, put a clamp here, so now it loops down and around, and we decided to change things up a little bit on the sandwich plate. So originally we had a 90 coming off the top, and then we were gonna run it around this way, but we ended up running out of length, so we ended up putting a straight fitting on the side instead and running it this way. So we end up with a bit of slack here. I think this was a good way to use up the slack because it's kind of out of the way, and if we need to adjust it forward or back, we have that option. So I think this is the best way to do it. So I think now we're going to remove the sandwich plate. We'll get the plugs installed on the 2 ports that we're not using, so this one and this one. Oil pressure can still come off the top, so I think we're about ready to finalize this thing. All right guys, as you can see, the engine is basically complete. I'm still waiting on a few minor things, and then this engine will be 100% ready to go. But with that being said, I think we are about ready to drop the engine in the bay. That's probably going to be the next step because I need to finish mocking up a few things. So it probably won't be the final install, but we definitely want to get it installed in the engine bay, and that will allow us to mock up a lot of the stuff that didn't end up fitting. So then we can get some fabrication done, make sure everything fits, and then we can pull the engine one last time, finalize everything, and then do the final install. So as you can see with the oil supply line, the flange I got didn't have a 90 on it, but I was still able to make it work. So I think I'm just gonna run it as is for now. Plan is still to get a 90-degree fitting to run off of it, and that'll just clean up that supply line a little bit more. But for now, I'm just gonna run it as is. So yeah guys, we're getting pretty close to being able to fire this thing up. So plan for tonight, actually, I got some people coming over to help me out, and we're actually gonna drop the engine in the bay today. So it's happening, I'm pretty stoked about it. But like I said, we got a bit of mock-up and fabrication to do yet before we can finalize everything. But this is a huge step. I've been waiting on this for quite a few years already. But yeah guys, I'm probably gonna end this video here. I got a lot accomplished in this one. Took a while to make this one, and there's some pretty old footage in it, but that's because I was waiting on parts. So now I got most of the parts to put the engine together. I'm just waiting on a few minor things. But yeah guys, thanks for watching the video. If you like it and you're stoked about the progress, give me a thumbs up. Drop me a comment below. As always, I love to hear feedback from you guys. All comments are appreciated. And if you haven't subscribed already, definitely consider doing so. We got lots of content coming on this car. We're gonna be firing it up very soon. Goal is to have it running probably, I don't know, middle of May. Maybe that's a little ambitious. Beginning of June would be amazing if we could do that. So that's my goal. We wanna make that happen. I'm gonna be going hard on this thing. So stay tuned for that. And we got racing season coming up. All kinds of stuff. So if that kind of stuff interests you, definitely consider subscribing. We'll see you guys on the next one.